Guys, how you all doing? I would like to start today's conversation just by asking everybody a question. And the question that I want to ask you today are what are some of the thoughts, what are some of the feelings, some of the words that come into your mind when you think about somebody struggling with addiction or substance use disorder? You see, the challenges faced by people who struggle with addiction can be so deep and so meaningful that it can change the direction of their lives. And the shame and the powerlessness that addiction causes can keep people stuck, and lives are needlessly being lost to something that is treatable and that is preventable. Now, as an addiction nurse therapist, I ask that very same question to many people from many walks of life. And here are just some of the responses that I typically receive. And there are plenty more negative associations. My question again is, do some of these words reflect some of the things that come into your mind whenever I asked you that question at the very beginning? Let me start by doing a proper introduction. I had a nice one at the start, but it's nice to hear from me. So my name is Gary Rutherford. I am a registered mental health nurse, and I am an addiction nurse therapist. And as mentioned, in 2022, I was awarded the Royal College of Nursing's Nurse of the Year Award by peers in my profession. I'm also the founder of a not-for-profit addiction recovery organisation called ARC Fitness, based in the northwest of Ireland. Through this, I support individuals and families struggling with addiction recover using access to physical activity, professional support, community, and importantly, hope. I'm also involved in academia. I've published research, and I'm engaged in ongoing research on addiction and recovery. Now, it mightn't look like it today, but I'm also a qualified personal trainer, and I'm a massive fan of the humble burpee, much to the disappointment of many people who come to one of my classes. But I'm also a husband, and I'm also a father. And you see, when you meet me today, I appear reputable, credible, successful even. But the last thing that I want to tell you about me, and I always leave this last on purpose, is that I'm an individual in 12 years long-term recovery from drug and alcohol addiction. That's right, this well-dressed, credible, reputable individual was once drug and alcohol dependent for 15 years and led a very different life than the one that he does today. When I throw this up, I ask you that question again. What are some of the thoughts or feelings come into your mind when you think about somebody who struggled with addiction? You see, my battle with addiction started young. I used substances from a young age, and immediately my relationship with it was destructive. Now, I had a great upbringing. I had lovely parents and a wonderful home. I was just a highly anxious child, and I was nervous. I wasn't always 6'2" and a personal trainer. I was small and I was heavy and I was bullied in school. This left me to feel that I was broken or that I was different to other people. And you see, bullying will do that to someone. I used drugs and alcohol to feel confident, to feel accepted, to feel included by the people who were around me. And I jumped straight into that relationship with both of my feet. You see, at the beginning, drugs and alcohol alleviated feelings of anxiety, fear, and emotional pain. But of course, over time, I became reliant on them and didn't develop these coping mechanisms myself. And again, like many people who struggle with addiction, it led me to some really dark places. I made some really poor decisions, and I caused hurt and pain to a lot of different people. You see, by the age of 30, I had a failed marriage. I had lost jobs. I had collected criminal convictions. I had broken my back, lost fingers and thumbs, and various alcohol-related accidents. I had numerous hospitalizations, number of clinical detoxes, and spent time in various residential rehabilitation centres. See, that was my experience of substance use, and it is a stark contrast to the life that I lead today. Now, I lead a life today that was only made possible by people whose lens in which they viewed me was different to people that I had experienced before. See, those people carried a light of hope and a light of possibility. But most importantly, those people saw me as an individual with a problem and not a problematic individual. So, I want to take you back here. It's February, it's 2010. It's bloody freezing. And I find myself in another residential rehabilitation centre, surveying the destruction and the chaos of my life. And you see, if rehab gives you anything, there's plenty of time to reflect on the damage that addiction not only causes you, but also the people that are in your life. But see, this time it had to be different. I was tired. I was exhausted. And sitting in that room alone, I came to the harsh realization that for years, addiction had robbed and disconnected me from purpose, from possibility, and from hope. Now, I eventually got and stayed sober. That's not an easy process. Ask anybody who's trying it. It's the hardest thing that I've ever had to do. But I got there because I needed and I wanted it to be different. And I stand before you all today, 12 years sober, drug and alcohol free. Now, I'm going to shift the topic a little bit, okay? And I'm going to ask this question to the room. Who here engages in physical activity on a regular basis? A show of hands. I know there are some. Excellent. Makes you feel good, doesn't it? We know that physical activity is good for our physical health. We know that it's good for our mental health. But physical activity has been used to support individuals with mental health problems and substance use disorders for quite some time. It's not a new concept. The research around this is there for 42 years. You see, physical activity was a game changer when it came to my recovery from addiction and substance use. I want to take you back. My good friend Tim dragging me to a running club 4 weeks after my last relapse, okay? I would love to tell you that I took to it like a duck to water and I got there and I was like a gazelle. That wasn't to be the case. It was an awful experience, okay? I was unfit and I was unhealthy and I was far from the image of a runner, as you can imagine. I got to the session and it was cold and it was wet, there was mud, and I puked after the session and I said to Tim, "I'm retired, lad. That's me. Thanks, but no thanks." But Tim knew something, and Tim came back the following week, and with some positive words, a bit of encouragement, and a swift kick in the backside, I found myself back at the running club that night. And guess what happened? I did the session, and I didn't die. It was just that little bit easier than it was the first time. But it was enough for me to want to go back again, and then go back again, and then go back again. I soon found myself attending regular sessions at a running club. And slowly my identity started to shift from somebody who was struggling with addiction and substance use to someone who focused on their health and who loved to run. See, now I was surrounded by a community of people who didn't see me as an addict and who didn't see me as an alcoholic. No, they saw me as a runner. They saw me through a very different lens. And you see, my work today and the work that I do today is birthed from that experience. See, I wanted to create something special that not only supported people struggling with addiction and their families to get well and enter recovery. I wanted them to thrive and succeed in a life that's possible when you engage in the process. Over 5 years on, we have supported hundreds of families and individuals access support and reclaim their lives. All of our programs are rooted in physical activity because just like a well-built house needs a foundation, for me, I believe successful recovery needs an emotional, physical, and nutritional foundation for it to be successful. You see, we need this firm foundation before we can start unpacking years of trauma and years of pain. And you see, the values that we have are simple: non-judgment, compassion, empathy, and hope. And I'm reminded of a quote by St. Francis of Assisi. And whether you're spiritual or not, it's irrelevant because it's extremely poignant to what we're talking about. And the quote is this: "Go out and preach the gospel at all times, and where necessary, use words." You see, to me, This highlights the importance of our actions. This highlights the importance of how we talk to people, how we engage the people, how we make people feel. That's how we treat people when they come into the doors of Arc Fitness. We don't treat them as people with problems or as problems. We treat them just as we would like to be treated ourselves, with kindness, with empathy, and with respect. Shameless plug. I have been working in this area for quite some time, as you can imagine from that introduction, and I have worked with many people who struggle with substances. And you know what? They can change their lives, but they can also change the lives of the people that are around them. That's really important. You see, I have seen people enter recovery, run marathons, complete triathlons, get their kids back from care, return to education, return to employment, and go out there and gain professional accreditations, you know what? To help and support other people in pain. You see, that is the lens in which I view people who struggle with addiction, and it is a lens of hope, and it is a lens of possibility. I've come into so many contact with individuals that are struggling with this, and I'll tell you what people struggling with addiction are not. They are not hopeless. They are not worthless. They are much more than that. Some of the kindest, strongest, empathetic, and impressive people that I have met in my life have overcome addiction. They are much more than the sum of their problems. So as a society, we need to stop judging people on the issues that are in their lives and that they're facing, and look at it through a different lens and a bigger picture. That's really important. You see, my mission is to bring addiction and recovery out of the shadows. Because it's only whenever we do that do we start to see people who struggle with addiction through a very different lens. And when we see them through a different lens, then we treat them differently and we give them permission to recover. That was my experience. People saw me differently. That lens gave me permission to change and not be afraid. We need to start to understand addiction better, because when we understand addiction's causes and the biology of it, then we will understand that people don't choose this path. And when we understand that, we treat people differently. Addiction is a complex thing, okay? Nobody sets into it willingly. It's complex and it's complicated. There are physiological and there are psychological impacts to it. I didn't think that it would be a great idea to have to drink or take a drug first thing in the morning just so I didn't get sick. See, it was a lens of fear and it was a lens of shame that did that. My hope today, my hope for everybody today, is that when we view people differently, then we start to change how we react and impact with people who are struggling with addiction. I'm going to show you a short clip now, because this clip demonstrates exactly what happens when we view people struggling with addiction through a different lens.
Describe what life was like in the thick of addiction.
Disastrous.
Dark.
Mayhem. Lonely.
Suffocating. Chaos.
Painful.
Hell.
Traumatizing.
And what's life like now in recovery?
There's a freedom.
Brighter. Contentment.
Celebration. Heaven.
Full.
Enjoyable.
Beautiful.
Magical. Words have power.
And so do the stories we tell.
The labels we choose paint a picture.
But we're more than any one thing.
We are more than our worst flaw.
Our biggest regret.
Our worst moment.
We are more than the sum of our mistakes.
We're more than that.
So, my question today, as I finish up this conversation, is simple. What are some of the things, what are some of the thoughts, what are some of the feelings, the words and emotions that come into your mind now when you think about somebody struggling with addiction or substance use disorder? Thank you for your time.